Hi, I am Adam Levine. I am the Associate Curator of Ancient Art at the Toledo Museum of Art and the Associate Director, and I am the curator, along with Harriet Balkind, of I Approve This Message, Decoding Political Ads, where we look at presidential television ads between 1952 and 2012 and help you understand how they cause you to feel one of four emotions: hope, pride, anger, or fear. I have a great job. I adore my job, partly because I get to work with her, but also because I get to be around art all day. I studied art history. I did my PhD in art history, and if you want to be a curator in a museum, that's probably the best way to accomplish it, to study a lot of art.
And I'm Harriet Balkind, and I'm guest curator for the exhibit I Approve This Message, Decoding Political Ads. My background is marketing, brand strategy, and that evolved into an interest in political advertising and how they work.
Now the exhibition, as you can see, is structured around these emotions. So instead of segregating ads by issue, by saying we're going to look at political ads, presidential ads that focus on immigration or that focus on gun control, we said actually the way to understand these ads is to think about which emotion they cause the viewer to feel. So the exhibition has 4 different theaters in this first part, each one dedicated to a different emotion. And as you can see, if you turn just to your right, there's this wall, and you can choose to go either to the right or the left. The side you're looking at right now is the negative emotional wall of fear and anger. The other side of that wedge wall, and here you see the positive emotional path, where you'll find the pride and the hope theaters. So when you walk into the exhibition, you come to this point, and you have 2 roads that you can take. You can either go down towards fear and anger, or towards pride and hope. Whichever path you take, you end up coming back through the other way, so you get to experience all of the emotions. But we did divide the front part of the exhibition into positive and negative halves.
Just want to add one thing to what Adam was saying about the emotions. And that is that the whole point is to experience the emotion, which is why we created different theaters, so you could experience the emotion yourself. Because if someone just tells you something, you may not believe it or you may not understand it. But if you experience it, you have a whole different sensibility about what that emotion does and how you respond to it. Researchers over the past 10 to 15 years have looked very closely at why people vote, and those are the 4 emotions that are key. So the point is that people think of just the creative part of an ad, but in fact there are different techniques that are used within the context of that creative. So what we try to point out in this exhibit is that there's association, confusion, contrast, repetition, and omission in political ads that are particularly impactful. Another thing we should just point out to you, these emotions don't just sort of live in a vacuum. They're used in certain ways, which you'll see through imagery and music, and through the persuasive techniques that we outline on some large frame-by-frame ads. In every theater, you'll see a panel that describes the emotion. In this case, it's pride, and how that emotion impacts you within the context of the election. So you understand why it's important.
And we've tried to, if I can just read it for a second, this exhibition is really meant to be informative and educational, but it's meant to be fun. Harriet already spoke about how it's meant to be an experience, it's meant to be immersive, it's meant to engage all of your senses. We want you to have a good time, there's no rule that says education can't be fun, and we tried to make it that way. So you might think that when you go to a museum, it's really dense wording, right? The prose is kind of stilted. Here we say, when you feel approval, you feel a sense of pride. Pride can be positive when you feel good about yourself and your country, negative if there's a loss of pride when standards aren't met. In this theater, the focus is on the aspirations of your president and your country to be their best. We tried to make this accessible to everyone, and we hope that you have a chance to see the exhibition and feel that way too.
And I will just add to this, as an advertising marketing person, one thing you don't want to do is have strings of 3-syllable words. You want to be able to talk to people in a conversational way so that they actually understand what you're saying. And that's what we really tried to do here, was just make this...
We wanted to avoid preposterous juxtapositions of verbiage.
Well said.
There we go. To come in and get a sense of what a theater is like. They're small, intimate spaces. Obviously, it's very loud in here. Part of the design was by intent to create a loud, dissonant, in-your-face, bright, brash space, because that's what political discourse is like. This models the type of discussions that these politicians are having. Come with me just into the theater. You can probably hear this ad much more clearly.
So when people walk in this room and kind of hear the music and the noise, and they instantly know they're in an environment that's very different than most museums.
That's right. Absolutely. And this is the catchiest song in the entire exhibition. An ad for Richard Nixon called Nixon Now. Sort of the archetypal upbeat ad. The playbook has been followed on this one by many, many candidates over the years.
And those of us who created this exhibit found ourselves singing this
over and
in
over
the shower.
again.
And the next day we would go, "Were you singing Nixon Now?" I mean, it's
a little bit embarrassing, really. It's just totally stuck in your head.
Right.
But that means that's a good example of its effectiveness.
When you go into the mood room, the music is original. The images you're going to see are stock images, and they're images that you might see, you could expect to see in a political commercial. And the idea in the mood room is what has been proven now, and that is you feel before you think. So you may say to yourself, "Oh, I'm very rational about the decisions I'm making." But when you go in here, we challenge you to not be able to feel what the images and the music are going to persuade you to feel.
Why don't we head in so you can get a view of what's going on in there. And we'll pull the curtains back for you. Perfect timing. Come on, go on up. Right now, up to 8 different images, 4 projectors in the ceiling, projecting down so you can get right up close before you even create a shadow. There's a series of faces, 2 on each wall. And now we're about to start with fear. you're wondering, come on, everything we just saw in the mood room is in an ad, I don't believe you. There's an ad with a wolf right behind me, an anti-McCain Palin ad. There's an ad by George W. Bush that shows wolves in the forest in an ode to a Ronald Reagan ad. If you say, oh my goodness, there was some pretty raw scenes of drug use. Well, look at Richard Nixon's ad, First Right. So even though this is stock footage, everything that you see in the mood room could be seen in another ad.
As you look at these theaters, while the dates have changed and the ads have changed and the candidates have changed, a lot of the issues discussed remain the same. And if you have a historical perspective, which is really important, you begin to see promises made, promises unfulfilled, and some promises that actually came to fruition. But as you follow it from 1952 to 2012, you see how we're still talking about the same things for the past 50 years. The Change Theater is a little different. It really shows more social change in how we talk to women, how we approach women, and how we approach race and rights in this country. So, for example, in 1952, you'll see an ad with a woman pushing a vacuum cleaner who's perfectly coiffed. For those of you who don't know what coiffed means, it's their hair styled. And she's got a pin on and she looks beautiful and she's vacuuming her home and she's talking about how if she votes for Eisenhower, she knows her family will be safe. And as we cycle through, we go up to Lena Dunham, who you may know from HBO Girls fame, talking about her first time voting. In this case for President Obama. So you do see that there's a method to the madness in terms of how messaging evolves from one decade to the next. This explains, do political ads reflect our culture or do political ads shape it? And what that means is by watching political ads, will you go in one direction or another? Or are the ads taking you in one direction or another because our culture is directing you that way? And it's probably a combination. Why you hear candidates say, I approve this message. And surprisingly, this is a relatively new thing. Actually came from the Bipartisan Campaign Act, Reform Act, which was McCain-Feingold. And the idea was that if candidates had to stand by their ads, with the stand by your ad provision, I approve this message, that the ads would be less negative and less attack oriented. Unfortunately, that has not been the case. And since this happened, the ads have actually gotten more negative. One of the reasons candidates say this, and this is national candidates, this only applies to national candidates, is if they say, I approve this message, and there are a few other things. They have to have an image, they have to say who paid for the ad. They get the lowest advertising rate. Everything's tied together. For media, this is huge because during an ad campaign, particularly in swing states, the networks are inundated with ads. So to get the lowest rate is important. It can save literally tens of millions of dollars for a candidate. Today, even though you'll see I approve this message, it doesn't necessarily mean the candidate actually saw the ad. So just take it with a grain of salt. It's great that they say that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has the candidate's stamp of approval. I mentioned earlier, things don't happen in a vacuum. Things come together and merge. So for example, the reason political ads started in 1952 to be on TV is because it wasn't until 1952 that there were enough televisions in people's homes to make it worthwhile. So we put together a timeline that includes technology, laws and political spending, advertising and politics, and news events, because all of these things came together to bring us where we are today. We started in the 20s because that's when radio became a real thing, and that's when mass media basically began, where you could talk to more than one person at a time. This is 1948. Truman was the first president to purchase television time to deliver a speech. 1951, first transcontinental cable is completed. That meant TV networks could now broadcast coast to coast. That was in the 1950s, not so long ago. It was also the first color TV broadcast. In 1969, the first internet was established. Of course, it wasn't until the 1990s that it became useful to the world as a whole. But it took that many years, 20 years. By 1980, 98% of American households had at least one TV, and CNN launched. And you may not believe this, but nobody thought anyone would want to see a 24-hour news network. First episode of the late night satire show, Politically Incorrect. This is the Bipartisan Campaign Act that we talked about with I Approve This Message, 2002. 2006, Twitter launches. Changed everything. Not then, but now. 2015, social media becomes increasingly important and influential during the presidential primary. First time. Google enables advertisers to target ads by congressional district. The politicians are beginning to understand that the internet is a great way to focus in precincts, districts, states, regions. They never could do that before. There's an old advertising adage, I'm paying a lot of money and half of it is useful and works and the other half's not, but I don't know which half. Today they can actually track it and know exactly what's going on. We wanted people who were viewing the exhibit to know this was about the voter. It's about you and me and your friends. It's not about the presidents or the congressmen. We're the ones who make this decision, and that's why it's so important to vote. For everyone to vote, because it's the one time you have the power.